Yo, what's going on, YouTube? And welcome back to Goal Line Hockey. It's your boy Kevin Forte, and today we are taking a look at the Toronto Maple Leafs as there's a lot going on in Toronto. Obviously, this is a big year for the Maple Leafs. Of course, the playoffs, and will they finally get over the hump of getting past the first round and this and that? Yeah. That's always on the table, but it's even deeper than that because there's a lot of rumors out there about what could potentially going on in Toronto. Now, is this just smoke and mirrors, or are they just trying to create stories because it's Toronto? I think there's some reason to believe that is on the table. But you can't deny that there is reason to believe that potentially Auston Matthews could leave the Leafs. So, what you have to remember here is the philosophy of the Toronto Maple Leafs and any team. What is their philosophy? Because, listen, guys, the stats don't lie. There is only one team in NHL history that has ever gotten to the Stanley Cup final with a player making over $10 million per season. And that was back in 2020, where the Montreal Canadiens goaltender Carey Price was making $10 million, and they got whooped in the finals against the Lightning. Now, of course, with the salary cap increasing, there aren't a ton of players and teams out there that have players with that kind of money, right? Obviously, in the 70s, 80s, 90s, early 2000s, nobody had those kinds of contracts. So take with that what you will, right? But it is something to look at. And the Leafs want to be the innovators and the ones on the cutting edge, and maybe they want to be the first team to win a Stanley Cup with a $10 million plus contract. But it hasn't happened yet. And it's one of those things that, if you're talking about potentially what Auston Matthews could get on his next contract, things could get interesting. And that even leads more to the reason of what should the Leafs do this year and next year, because salary-wise, things are going to change a lot in Toronto over the next 2-3 years. So there's a lot of rumors, and there's a lot going on. So we're going to start off with guys that are pending UFAs this summer for the Leafs. So Kerfoot is a UFA. Engvall, Kampf, Bunting, Simmons, Aston Reese, Holmberg, Dryden Hunt, Justin Hall, Connor Timmins, Jordy Ben, and Ilya Samsonov. Yep, that's it for now. So that is your UFA, RFA list for the Leafs, okay? Next year, Auston Matthews, William Nylander, TJ Brody, Mark Giordano, and Matt Murray. There's some pretty big names there. Now, that's why there's been some rumors about what could happen here with Nylander and Matthews over the last couple of days. So, we're going to start off with the first little bit of rumors, which I think is kind of funny. And this is from Michael Trakos. He says that Trakos wonders if the Maple Leafs could bring back James Van Riemsdyk. I think it's definitely something that's interesting, but if you ask Flyers fans, they aren't a fan of JVR. I actually saw an article this morning where they were kind of making fun of JVR. He stands in front of the net and doesn't do any of the work, and then he just buries the puck in. Well, you know what? It does take a little bit of skill in tight there, deflecting pucks, scoring on rebounds. You have to predetermine where the puck's going to be before it gets there. Gretzky-esque stuff, and I'm not saying he's Gretzky, but determining where the puck is going to be and things like that. JVR is very good at that, and he was good at that in Toronto as well. He's just a little expensive, and that is something to consider. But again, if the Leafs are trying to win a Stanley Cup here in the next 2 years, he has some chemistry and experience with this Leafs team. Maybe he does make a return to Toronto. I think it would be kind of interesting. Another team that was thrown in the mix for JVR, though, I thought something that was kind of poignant and interesting. From Dan Kinjarski. He says that James Van Riemsdyk would be a nice fit for the Penguins. So the Penguins and the Leafs potentially in on JVR, I think is kind of interesting and something I wanted to, at the very least, mention, if nothing else. Now, we mentioned this guy earlier in today's video, and that is Michael Bunting. Michael Bunting is on the final year of his contract, and he's playing pretty well for the Leafs. He's one of their best players, and it's a guy that I think the Leafs want to be careful with. This is a guy that doesn't come around all the time. There's a guy that, left Arizona to go to his hometown team in Toronto, grew up in Toronto, born in Toronto, and he has a chance to play for the Leafs long term. He has to sign a contract, though, and I wonder if Dubas and the Leafs are going to kind of take advantage of that hometown player and maybe hope for a hometown discount. But according to Nick Kypreos, he said it stands to reason that Michael Bunting could pass the $4 million AAV mark this season, and likely that is $4 million per season on his next contract. So it's kind of easy to see that, right? He had 63 points. Yeah, 63 points last year in 79 games with the Leafs. He's already got 26 points in 37 games, 11 goals, 15 assists. That 11 goals is more than Tarasenko and O'Reilly, right? They each have 10 goals. Michael Bunting has 11. So he's got more goals than those two players, and those are pretty good hockey players here in the NHL. So the Toronto Maple Leafs have a big decision to make here with Bunting. He's still very young, at 27 years old, and his scoring depth, which has been kind of mutilated over the last couple of years, right? 2 years ago, it was Zach Hyman going to Edmonton. This past summer, it was Ilya Mikheyev going to Vancouver. Now is Michael Bunting. They can't let this guy go. They need some secondary scoring depth. And especially if you want to get past the first round of the playoffs, you need depth scoring. And Michael Bunting perfectly provides that, except it's going to be a little bit more than his $950,000 contract past this season. So things get even more interesting as we heard some stuff about William Nylander. And I thought this was kind of something that had to be discussed because, again, when you talk about Matthews, you have to talk about Nylander in the same sentence and the same breath because their contracts are both due next summer. Now, obviously, it's not going to load for me now, and I can't actually see what I want to, but we're going to talk about Matthews here. And this is from Nick Kypreos again. He said that the Maple Leafs will not, quote-unquote, easily hand over an 8-year, $15 million per season contract to Auston Matthews. I don't think that's any surprise. I think that, the Leafs are one of those teams that, we're talking right now about David Pastrnak and what he could get from the Bruins, and I think the Bruins are willing to give him whatever he wants, basically, to keep him there. I don't know if the Leafs are as easy going about that and just, okay, whatever, just stay here. I don't think the Leafs are that in tune with doing something like that here for Matthews, but I wonder if it's, trying to use that leverage, but it's also kind of they don't have the money to do that. It's not like just all of a sudden the salary cap's just going to go up. It doesn't work like that. So, again, his contract ends in July 1st of 2024. So we still have a good year and a half till that decision really has to be made, but it's still something that you have to look at. And when I look at the Maple Leafs, this is a team that is trying to win the Stanley Cup in the next 2 years anyway. So even if Matthews leaves in 2024, they still have 2 more cup runs from him at his current contract. So it is what it is, but this is something that, again, we have to keep an eye on. And okay, so here it is. So this is also from Kypreos. He said, the longer Auston Matthews will go without an extension, the stronger William Nylander trade talks will get. And the reason for that is, it comes back to the money. So if they get to a point where they lose the leverage, the longer they go into the Matthews situation into next season, there is going to be that belief that, well, Nylander is not going to be around because they're going to lose leverage. They might be closer to that $15 million the longer into the season it goes, and that's where Nylander all of a sudden becomes more and more expendable because they know they're going to get closer to that $15 million per season mark than maybe, say, 13 for Matthews. So that is something to watch for. Again, it's not necessarily news, but this is stuff that people from inside the industry that have played in the game are talking about. And, Honestly, I think Nylander will end up leaving the Leafs. I think that this is kind of, it's nothing with Nylander. I think it's something that I think they're going to put a priority on Matthews. And who wouldn't? The guy had 60 goals last year for the Leafs, is really their franchise player, even more so than their own captain in Tavares. This is the guy in Toronto, number 34. And I think that the Leafs understand his significance and what he means to this team. Maybe they don't give him 15, but maybe they give him $14.5 million per season. You're not going to have the money to keep Nylander around. And that's just the reality of the salary cap era. Now, the question is, so I am very confident that Nylander won't be here past his current contract, which is this year and next. But the Leafs may have 3 options here. The first, you trade him this summer after this year's postseason. So that frees up some money this summer for you to maybe make some moves, re-sign Matthews, get that done this summer. Or, here's the second option. The second option, they play out next year, see how things go next season, and they maybe trade him at the trade deadline. Or, if they decide to keep him this summer, they decide to keep him into next season and go past the trade deadline, there's always the third option, which is you let him play out this year and next, and in July of 2024, William Nylander hits the free agency market. And that way they know for a fact they have this year and next of Matthews, Nylander, and Marner. And past that, we'll see what happens from there. And maybe we let him walk, and yeah, we're losing assets, yeah, whatever, but we're sacrificing a playoff run next year, which might be even more important than Nylander's worth, as crazy as that sounds. And Nylander's playing really well right now. He's going to ask for a big ticket. And if this pace continues for Nylander, this is a guy that's going to ask for probably close to $10 to $11 million on his next contract. He might. You're looking at the numbers that Bo Horvat's asking for right now in a contract year. Nylander's well above a point per game. He's got 42 points in 37 games. He's got 21 goals. This is a guy that can score, right? So it's one of those things that I think the Leafs are going to end up having to sacrifice Nylander in 2024, but it means that they keep Auston Matthews. I ultimately think that's what's going to happen here. Unless they are very much like, we don't want to lose Nylander for nothing, and we don't want to hear about this all summer, how, and into the season next year, how Nylander's not signed and this and that. I think they want to put all the focus on Matthews if it gets to the point where there isn't a deal done by training camp next year. And again, there's still another year till they're a free agent, but it's Toronto. That is going to be a hot topic. And I think that if Kyle Dubas learned anything from last time around with Marner and Nylander and Matthews, waiting them out till training camp doesn't necessarily work out that well. And the media and everything else, listen, guys, you remember how ugly things got with Marner and Toronto, the city of Toronto in general. Things got really, really bad. And, of course, he signed and everything's okay now and this and that, but before that contract, it was really it was like a revolution in Toronto. People were really turning on Marner. It got really, really ugly. And for Matthews to this degree and the success he's had there, the first ever Leaf to have 60 goals in a season ever. That's right. Ever in Toronto Maple Leafs history. It is to the point where they have to get this done as soon as possible. They're not in a market like Arizona. No discredit to those organizations like Arizona, Chicago, Columbus, where you could get a whole year of, okay, is he going to stay? Is he going to go? It is going to be every single day. Matthews is going to be asked the question, what's up with your contract? When are you signing long-term here? Are you signing long-term here? Kyle Dubas, every press conference, will be asked about Matthews, will be asked about Nylander. Prevent that headache, because that's one more hurdle. You already have a high enough task just getting past the first round. You don't need to be worrying about this contract semantic stuff It is something that is going to be put on full display next year, and I think it's best for the Leafs to avoid that as much as possible. But that's it for my tangent today. But the Maple Leafs have a huge decision here this summer, because as much as it's this summer, it's really next summer, because nothing might get done in 2023. I think the hope is that in 2023 for Leaf fans, right, they get past the first round, they find a way to lock up Samsonov long term. Pat myself on the back. I called that. I said he was going to be a good goalie. I said Vezina caliber, which might have been a little bit too high on him, but he's a very good goalie that's going to probably sign long term in Toronto. Get past the first round and locking up Matthews long term. Those are your three, I think, key things in 2023 for the Leafs. But we'll see what happens. Guys, let me know what you think down below. What do you guys think the Toronto Maple Leafs should do with Auston Matthews and, for another point, William Nylander? Do you guys think that they should maybe go down the road of, signing him this year long term so you don't have to worry about it, right? Signing Nylander long term this summer, getting that done. Waiting till next season, and then the two options in waiting next season, keeping him past the deadline, maybe losing him for nothing in free agency in 2024, or trading him before the deadline next year as well. So, again, we're looking long-term here. The Leafs are focused on trying to just win tomorrow night and, win a playoff series and try and win a Stanley Cup. But the next 2 years, it's going to be quite interesting up there in the city of Toronto. Guys, that's it for today's video. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you again next time.